Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Accuracy in America. I am your host, Don Irvine, and my co host in the nether regions of Virginia, Ryan McNichol.
Good morning. Hello to despicables, dregs, deplorables, chumps. Man, I'm going to start over because that's just so bad. Hello, deplorables, drags, despicables, chumps, Neanderthals, semi-fascists, and of course those dog-faced pony soldiers.
There we go. That's good. I thought you just would roll off your tongue.
Yeah, I mean, life comes at you fast. You know, all of a
That's
sudden you don't remember all the pejorative names you have.
That's right. You know, actually, this is a factor of your age, Brian. That's all.
There you go.
All right. Well, we haven't been together a little bit there. Had a trip to Utah and in between there. So, but happy to be back in the saddle. So
I want to ask about this. So you went to a BYU football game, right?
Right.
So is there any tailgating? Is anybody out there drinking beers like LSU?
Well, you know, there's barely a parking lot there. Okay. That stadium, it's an interesting situation because if you think about it, because, you know, you've been to University of Maryland, you've got all kinds of parking all over the place, right?
Yeah.
And there is, you know, they've got lot one and there's all kinds of tailgating going on all over the place. BYU, I've been scratching my head about this, trying to figure out exactly what it was, but I think because of there is a lack of the traditional tailgating. They really don't have a dedicated parking lot over there. They've got kind of a small the stadium itself is on the edge of the campus. It's basically the furthest part of the campus on that side. You actually
I've seen it. It's like when you get out of that, you're in town. You're not in.
Basically, you have the stadium, and then behind it, to part of it, you have neighborhoods. You have houses.
Yeah.
And then the other part of it is the church-owned buildings for their missionary training center. And then there's a parking lot between the MTC and the stadium on the one avenue that actually where you get to the main part of campus. There's a small parking lot. I have no idea who parks in there. And so, you know, I mean, and the traffic is horrible around there with game day because like a lot of other college fanatics, the BYU fans are just crazy. And so they turn out in droves. So my brother-in-law lives a mile and a half or 2 miles away from the stadium. I don't exactly know the exact distance. And so we pretty much walked there. My brother-in-law, for some reason, I don't even, for someone who's lived there for a long time, I don't even know why he actually had my wife says, drive us down there. And she drove like 3/4 of a mile, maybe. And then, look at the traffic and we're like, no, we're just going to get out so she could turn around. It was almost a waste there. And we didn't even bother calling on the way back. We just walked the entire way back, that was uphill. It's nice incline uphill and like that. But I mean, you walk through this neighborhood and you've got people who've got a little bit of a driveway. They've got signs out, parking $15, $20, $30 for people who want to park. If you can't, neighborhood parking is pretty limited. I did notice on the way out of the stadium that night, though, too, is that one of the houses that's really close to the stadium on that back side, they actually had a lighted Y in their backyard, which kind of resembles, that's one of the things that BYU's got. They've got Y Mountain. They've got a big Y up there on the mountain. And this guy had a backyard, and I guess he had a little bit of slope. And so he had an imitation Y on his backyard. So, you got to love college. I mean, that's what I love about college football. I don't care where you are in the country in general. I just love that whole thing. When you get into Division I college football in particular, you've got these fanatics. The stadium was not sold out that night, and that's what allowed us to get to the game because, I have, we've set up endowments at BYU, one in my father's name that's been going for, almost 20 years by now. And another one we're looking at setting up, and my wife and myself, we've done that. So we've got people out there. And my brother-in-law, all of a sudden, first of all, I'm never in town when BYU's playing. So, and I can't even remember when they played a Thursday night game because I don't follow it that closely. But all of a sudden, my brother-in-law tells my wife, he's on the phone the day before we leave. He's like, hey, I'm thinking about going to the game because his commute is now super short compared to how it used to be.
Right.
And so, but he says the tickets were like $50. And so he didn't want to spend $50. And so then he says, oh, I'm sure Don can get tickets. So that night I'm there. I'm sending an email to my contact in philanthropies and saying, I know it's late notice, but can we get a couple of tickets to the game? And we wound up with with tickets on the 40-yard line.
Yeah, that was pretty good tickets you had.
They were very good tickets. They're in. I don't know the stadium. I didn't know the stadium really at all. And my wife looked it up, and I guess it's part of people who are like the boosters and some of the legacy donors and things like that. So yeah, they were good seats, and it was near perfect evening. There was a hint of rain. There was a few raindrops, and then it kind of stopped. And my brother-in-law was very pessimistic. He brought an umbrella, and then as soon as a few raindrops, he opens the umbrella up without thinking about the people behind us. Just about hit them. I'm like, probably not a good idea.
Yeah.
So, it was a great experience. And I didn't really realize it was, I guess it was an ESPN game.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, I'm looking down at the field, and there's a person every once in a while holding up this pole with a lighted digital sign, and it's counting down the time, like 3 minutes, going 2:59, 2:58. And I didn't realize for a while those were the TV timeouts. So there was a heck of a lot of entertainment going on in between there, like little things that you would see at a minor league baseball game, people having little contests and stuff like that, or honoring somebody or whatever. And then later on, when it finally got dark, I look up in the student section way up, and I see ESPN in letters. I'm thinking, oh, that must be where they're sitting and watching the game. But at first, when I'm sitting there watching a game, I'm like, this is not going well. BYU's run defense is just letting them run. And, they
ended up winning, right?
They did end up winning. They won like 38-26, I think. They finally caught a little bit of fire there, but they had a little bit of a problem containing them in that first half. I guess Utah State had switched quarterbacks, and things like that. And so, because their season wasn't going anywhere, and they switched quarterbacks, and they actually didn't look all that bad, So it's always interesting when you go to those rivalry games, because I'm about 4 rows down. Every time Utah State was doing something good, this woman's up here doing this. And she's sitting next to, I'm assuming, her husband, who's wearing all BYU gear. So it's another.
That's what's going on in my house now, of course, with the baseball playoffs, right?
Because, yeah. Wait a minute. Mariners and Astros,
Mariners and Astros.
Yeah. I have to say, I thought for sure the Mariners had that game, but I'm going to say to you, I am never going to underestimate the Astros and Yordan Alvarez. I mean, that guy is amazing. Okay.
Yeah, he is.
You got that guy at the plate. Watch out.
Yeah. So I went to basketball practice that night. He was, he comes to bat, he hits the home run. I go in and I do practice. And so I haven't seen my wife, right? So I have to come home. She's not all that happy. But anyway. Yeah, that's right. UVA, not a lot of rivalry action going on there. UVA struggling this year. So
yeah, they are. So it just depends. I mean, you do have places where the fans are going to come out. I think if you're an Ohio State fan or Michigan Wolverine fan, you've got these huge stadiums, right? 100,000, 105,000, seating, and people come out, right? Yep. I'm going to guess that BYU Stadium seats, 40,000 or 50. Maybe it seats more than that.
It's like 50 or 60.
Maybe it's 50 or 60. Yeah. It wasn't completely full. It got fuller as that first half, we got close to the first half that was rolled on there. But part of that may be just some silly people trying to drive there, because you really got to walk to that stadium in order to make it within any reasonable, semblance of time and everything like that. But it was fun. But it was strange, because I could have sworn, I'm thinking, I was like, yeah, I've never been to a BYU football game. This will be great. And I'm sitting there in the game, and when BYU's offense finally started actually to pull together a string of good plays, they're marching down the field. All of a sudden, I had this flashback in my mind, And because they always do when they get rolling, the announcer goes, another BYU, and the fans go first down like this. And all of a sudden I'm like, wait a minute, I think I've been here before. And then as I'm going through my memory, I'm like, wait a minute, John Beck. I think I was here for a John Beck game, but I don't know why. And I mean, how long to go to John Beck play? Was it 15 years ago or something?
That's a long time.
So my faulty memory may say that was my second game, but I think these tickets were probably far better than that. Right. It's possible that I got those tickets back then because of the money we gave to BYU in my father's name after he passed or something like that. So you never know. Yeah. And then there's some stadiums where when the team does bad, I mean, wasn't a time there? I mean, where Saban was complaining about the students not showing up for their free tickets.
Well, what Saban's complaint was that they leave early.
Okay.
It's games out of reach one way or the other. By the fourth quarter, 3/4 of the crowd's gone because we are tailgating. We are eating and drinking and partying at our games. So.
Yeah. So then I wound up when I came back from Utah. I wound up at a Maryland game. And I kind of like the one we went to before. We had that president suite, but this time I invited my former boss with that investment company because he was a Purdue grad. So he'd never been to a Purdue football game, particularly at Maryland, at the University of Maryland. And so it came out, and I don't know where the heck he parked, but it took him a while we met up. He got there before kickoff and everything like that. But he was remarking about how he ran by lots of tailgaters and things like that. And I did my traditional thing, like, well, we got to the third quarter. Maryland was still kind of plodding along and Purdue was still kind of driving through them. I'm like, okay, I'm getting out of here before traffic. You can stay as long as you want and your team will probably win. So he texted me the next day. He was very happy about going to the game and very happy about the fact that they won. He wore his Purdue gear, but he wore a sweater with just a P on it, and he wore his hat. And he said he came back after getting a hot dog. He goes, he found one other Purdue person in that crowd. So I was like, hey,
wow,
yeah, that's like.
I mean, but one of the things Maryland has survived in recent years on visitors, right?
Yeah,
their football program because it's like that's the only chance they have to see their team near here anywhere.
Right. Matter of fact. He was telling me that he knew some other Purdue alums, I think from even his father's time or something like that, and there were he knew that there had been a bunch of people coming into town actually on top of the people who are local that were coming to the game specifically. Yeah. So we got that. All right, enough of all that fluffy fluff. Lots of stuff going on here. Actually, I'm going to ask you something I didn't have on the list because I just kind of want to get your reaction. Alex Jones, I have basically pretty much purposely avoided talking about him on the program for the most part since we've been doing this. But, this huge verdict comes down against him for which, I mean, he says he doesn't have the money. And it's just like a lot of typical court cases, more trying to send a message, I think, than anything else. I don't know that they'll collect much of anything like that. And I'm sure he'll appeal and try to get that whittled down. But is there any real sympathy for Alex Jones except for his diehard supporters?
Well, I mean, okay, America, don't do what he did, right? He accused people of lying when he didn't have any evidence they were lying. Okay. And he went nuts about, this didn't really happen and all this stuff. And it did happen. Okay. So, what he did there, it's not defensible. But what is sort of concerning is there's now, if you're a certain amount jerk, they can make you pay for that. They can charge you for that, right? And so, that in the case of Alex Jones, he's pretty egregious, and it's like you say, it's very hard to defend him, right? But if we can decide people were sufficient, if you're sufficiently jerk about what you say, we're able to, fine you, extract from you millions and millions of dollars, right? It won't be long till the list of things that are considered jerk starts to grow, right? So, this is okay. This is a reprehensible guy who brought a lot of this on himself. And I don't mean to, he should leave those families alone. What happened there was bad, but free speech is free speech. And so, did they demonstrate economic harm from this? I don't think so. And so I don't know. I mean, to me, it's kind of a troubling thing. And he will appeal it. And I think that the appeal is going to bring up some interesting issues. One is, are we not punishing him for free speech? And two, like, what is, what rule, what would they, what's their claim to damages, right? What do they, how did this cost them $960 million or whatever it was? And three, Ed Meese used to talk about when I was at Heritage a lot about, limiting civil verdicts, right? And, it's like you go back and forth on it, but I mean, he doesn't have $1 billion. And as obnoxious as he is, it's hard to argue that he caused $1 billion worth of trouble here. So, at the time, I don't want to defend. I don't want, nothing I'm saying here should be construed as a defense of Alex Jones. But, there are some questions here that are kind of troubling because, the left has proven pretty convincingly that, they don't care about free speech, and they don't care about telling the truth, and they don't care about, the limits that the Constitution places on censoring information, right? You have the federal, since the last time we did a show, you had the federal government, has been paying people to censor, to work with big tech to censor conservative messages, right? On the vax, on, healthcare in general and so forth. So, the government is spending money to put its fingers on the scale of what it doesn't do here. So, I don't know. Bob says it's a slippery slope. It is a slippery slope, right? That list will start growing pretty quickly. So, not an Alex Jones fan. I never have listened to his show. He started talking about one of the clips I saw about, the way to help him is to go on his website and buy his products. I didn't even know he had products. It's apparently nutritional something or other, up to you, but that's not my thing. But, and he also says he will appeal and keep it tied up forever, which he probably will. And that's probably not a terrible outcome.
Yeah, right. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, neither one of us are going to defend Alex Jones, but he does have, like every individual, a right to free speech. And this is a problem here, is that, verdicts like this and cases like this just continue to push the limits of this. The liberals, their interest in free speech is defining what free speech is, right? In terms of they want to be the arbiters of what this is, what
you're free to agree with them.
Right. Exactly. You can, as long as you agree with them, they're fine. As soon as you say something you disagree with them, no. And so, I think you look at the Alex Jones case and it's a potential there for something that, just opens it up for more things that are pretty questionable. I mean, there are plenty of jerks and just people that we don't agree with in the world, right, left, center, whatever. But does that mean that they should be sued for libel, slander, or whatever, give these damages? As you said, what is the economic damage? I mean, there was a lot of trauma and everything like this, obviously, with the death of these kids and this whole Sandy Hook type of deal, and what Alex Jones said was completely reprehensible. On the other hand, after all this time, exactly what are the economic damages to the families after all this time? That Alex Jones has got to pay for. This is it really, I mean, mental anguish and things like that. How do you define that? I mean, he definitely he may have caused some mental anguish on this, but the amount of the verdict, it's just, it also shows just kind of the ridiculousness of this. Maybe the jury thinks they're sending a message, but that automatically sends it up for appeal, and where others have to look at it and says, like, this isn't going to hold. Right. You can't award this kind of money.
Yeah, the message they're sending is you can't trust juries to send these.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I mean that and so that brings up, I mean, as you mentioned, Ed Meese and things like that. Just this has been a long-standing issue, I think, of juries and do we need tort reform and all these things have come down the line, and just how this whole legal system kind of gets out of control and out of whack. And
and it's like, it's probably a third to almost half of your medical bills is liability insurance for the doctor.
Right. Yeah,
So
and you have
this has real cost to all of us that there are these wild verdicts like this.
right. Yeah, I mean that's the thing. I mean, I think we went through a definite period where we had OBGYNs that were either quitting because of the high cost of insurance, or they were joining HMOs or something like that would protect them. But
Right.
the price
But that means less access, right?
right.
It means that, the rural doctors can't really do that. So they leave being rural doctors, which leaves you with no rural doctors, which is
Right.
a huge problem in the US. It's like we have big swaths of this country that have no doctor.
Right. Yeah, and that for someone, my age, as I look at, do I stay in Maryland, or do we move somewhere else at some point in time or whatever? How many stories do I read about people or hear, callers on talk shows or whatever, calling from these places where they've moved, to be a little bit more away from civilization. But, as you get older, you need to be closer to hospitals and doctors.
You gotta need civilization.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you need things. And I'm like, okay, maybe if you're in your 30s or 40s and you've got some money and you can do that, and we do have a lot of remote work from home situations now going on throughout the country. But if you're 60 plus, you don't want to be like Roscoe Bartlett and go off the grid.
Right.
unless Roscoe's got his own personal physician somewhere, lined up, right down the road or something like that. It's like, okay, Roscoe's, he may be extreme example.
He himself is an MD, so
yeah, that's
he does
true.
have a little more insight into it than me or you would, but still,
I
hear you.
I mean, how old is Roscoe now? 85, 90 years old?
Yeah, I mean, at some point, even he will need a doctor.
That's right. So, yeah, I mean, and this is right? I mean, we just all this stuff.
Right, that's right. So now you also have, like, another thing that came out this week is, you had PayPal saying, they can take, if you're fundraising for something that they consider misinformation, and Bob's list there was pretty handy at what they might consider misinformation, then they could charge you $2,500, right? Just take it right out of your account, because they don't like it. So, I mean, they lost a lot of accounts. A lot of conservatives said, we're not doing anything with PayPal anymore because of this. So, these things have costs, and they should have costs.
I mean, that whole thing with PayPal was absolutely nuts.
Yeah. I mean, it's just like you blew up your company for no reason.
Yeah. Yeah, I should ask a friend of mine who used to work for PayPal what he thinks about that now.
Yeah, go woke, go broke.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think we see that. I mean, that was just like, if you want to help feed the narrative about big tech companies being, hostile to conservatives, PayPal just made it extremely public. I mean, that was just, kind of one step over the line there.
Yeah.
It's just like, I cannot believe they did that. And right now in this environment with all the competition for payment systems and all these type of things, to me, that is just shooting yourself in the foot. I mean, that is not,
Amen.
There's no competitive advantage. I think that's a competitive disadvantage in the long run for them. And I think they're going to see that. They're going to get hurt by that. All right. So let's just touch on for a few minutes, at least on the whole Ukraine-Russia deal. Not going well for Russia, though. Russia has been trying to throw out these airstrikes and stuff like that at some civilian targets. But once again, I mean, it just seems like desperation on Putin's part, because they seem to be in retreat in a lot of areas. They have the faux, fake annexation, just the vote.
Yeah.
I think the UN was even going to condemn it or something. So it's just crazy. I mean, what's going on there? It's amazing, though. I mean, to watch Ukraine, slog through this, and they're really inflicting pain on Russia.
Right there. So, the thing the Russians got mad about was, they blew up the bridge that goes from, it's a 12-mile long bridge. It hadn't been finished that long, that goes from the Russian mainland to Crimea. And so, that's what they've been punishing the Ukrainians for. Supposedly there's some activity around a Polish pipeline this morning. There's news of. So, and there's missile strikes all over Ukraine. One very near a nuclear plant, which raised some concerns. They shut down the nuclear plant, blacked everything out there for a while. He's showing that he does not have to lose, right? he has the weaponry to, if he's willing to go all in to win the war. But he doesn't, we don't know if he has a mandate to go in, if he has the support. There's some people, we're starting to see the pretty persistent reports that some of the people in his group don't really approve of all that, and they're looking for a way out. There are people in the West now saying that Ukraine should reach out and seek a peace deal. I think, if I'm Ukraine, the peace deal starts with you get out of the country. When you get out of the country, we are happy to talk about not fighting anymore. But first of all, you leave. They also are having trouble. These guys they drafted or forced in or whatever to the military, many of them don't want to fight. A lot of them are arranging the surrender almost as soon as they get in the country. Where can we meet you and give up? So, that's not necessarily good for your thing. So as we sit here, I don't know. I don't know how much further. It's like 32 weeks now. I don't know how much longer they can go. It's about to go to winter. So you usually get a break in fighting that far north in the winter. May not happen this time. They may try to fight through the winter. I don't know that Putin can stand that the status quo maintains until spring, because the status quo is going to be, picking off of lots of Russians that are in Ukraine now, and destabilizing, demoralizing the forces that are already working on this.
Yeah, I mean, the conscripted forces who don't want to be there in the beginning, like you said, some of them are surrendering and other ones that are fighting, but a lot of them are dying. We get to the harsh winter, I think that's even more chance of let's just say, no, give me shelter, give me food, get me out of here. I'll gladly be a prisoner of war rather than risking my life if I can somehow get back to Russia someday when this whole thing is over and resume my life and get back to my family and whatever. Just those, a lot of them voted with their feet, right? They as soon as they tried to make their way out of the country, flee, so they wouldn't get drafted in there and everything like this. It's just that what an utter disaster for Putin. On this,
Biden said, I think one thing Biden was right about, he said he's a rational actor who miscalculated here. I think that Putin thought this would be, he didn't even give the army a whole lot of food because he thought it would go so quickly. And he would be welcomed with open arms and so forth. And that's not true. That's not what happened.
Yeah, no, it's just something else. All right. So you kind of led into this. Biden had this interview, I guess it aired Tuesday night on CNN. Some of it had been previewed before then. But, where are we with Joe Biden here? You mentioned how he talked about Putin in there. And then I think he also mentioned that he wouldn't seek Putin out at the G20, but if Putin was willing to talk about prisoner exchange, a la, particularly Brittany Griner or something like that, he'd be willing to meet with him. But he was also asked about Hunter. He's very proud of Hunter. He's standing by his son.
Yeah. So, there was a lot of the leftist media rushed out to say what a terrific father he was. And they played the tape of him saying, "Hon, I know you're hooked on drugs, and I hope you find, what help you need," and leaving him this message. It's like, okay, first of all, Herschel Walker, who y'all say is the worst human being alive, right? He leaves a message telling his son, the son who went nuts and went against him, that he loves him every day. They found his phone, and they went through his phone, and every day, at least once a day, "I love you, son." And the son rarely even answers. He rarely even says anything back. But Herschel does it every day. So compared to Joe Biden, who has, his son running an extortion racket and, molested daughter in the shower, you don't get to be father of the year with that record, So, but they, anything they can to lionize Joe and make Joe seem human and great and so forth, it's ridiculous. It's, it's like the same with the guy in Pennsylvania, Fetterman, right? He can't speak a complete sentence without a teleprompter and a lot of help and this and that and the other helping him. It's like, stop and think about this. This guy's trying to be a senator, right? So you get pulled into cloakrooms and you get asked to make deals and all this stuff, right? You don't have time to set up the teleprompter and the lights and all this stuff. He's back. That's right. Putin gets mad. He does have some options that we do have to think about. I'm increasingly thinking that he doesn't go there, but Bob could be right. And that's another thing. Putin didn't dare do any of this while Trump was president. As soon as Biden comes in, we're at the brink of nuclear war. So it was just like his ability to get Europe to cooperate is waning quickly. His ability to get the Saudis and others to pump more oil, has been completely repudiated. So we're stuck in it now. We're going to be paying a lot more for gas. OPEC has announced a big output production cut. Right, the Russians aren't going to help us. They refuse to back down from Green New Deal boondoggle. Right, so we're going to be stuck with very little gasoline and very high prices. Probably for the duration of his term. So there's a lot of stuff going on here, but this is a presidency that's spiraling out of control.
Right. Back. Go ahead and go back to Fetterman. You were talking about too.
So Fetterman, he had an interview the other day, and he can't form a sentence either. And the reporter comes out of the interview and says, we did, you do small talk before and after the interview itself gets set up, right? Like we usually talk for a minute after the show, right? Yeah. So she said, the reporter says in the small talk, he doesn't seem to be able to understand what I'm saying or provide an answer, right? And so, this thing is like, that's right. So, then the other reporter's like, well, I've talked to him for an hour and he never broke and sweat. He said everything back in perfect order to me, And so it's like, you can see him just like circling the wagons. But the lady, she's not out trying to make any points. She's a Democrat reporter, right? But the fact is that guy is in serious trouble because people have realized that the things you actually have to do to be a U.S. senator, he's probably not capable of doing them. And it's not just the stroke, right? The hoodies and all that stuff, he had all that going on before he had the stroke, right? It's like the Senate just doesn't operate that way. You can't send them, guys who are into drugs and tats and hoodies and right. That doesn't wash there. These are real people. They're serious people, and they don't play with clowns. So, I think if Pennsylvania elects him, it's going to effectively have one senator.
Yeah, the guy he really can't function very well. He's got lots of issues there, so that'll be a problem. But on Biden's interview with CNN, I think he mentioned when talking about Hunter, he was trying to talk about the lying about on the gun purchase, and Biden said something to the effect about, he answered this question about the drug use or whatever, but I don't know, didn't answer it correctly or something. Right. I can't remember. Did Biden address the other part of that issue, which was the tax issue?
He said that it would be tax and the weapons charge, and then he explained something about the weapons charge. He didn't say anything about the tax.
Yeah, so
that's income derived from bribery, basically. Which Joe at least suborned and probably encouraged and arranged. So, they're in trouble. The laptop is not going away, and it's not false, right? You're not going to be able to argue that, someone made this up or Russian disinformation or any of that. They're going to pay the price for it. They can just choose when to pay it.
So he also said something about, he keeps being asked about running again in 2024. And now he's saying that, a decision or announcement will be made after the midterms. I don't know that the midterms, no matter, even if the Democrats keep the Senate, would make that much of a difference in Biden's future, because things aren't going well in general. What changes unless there's some massive thing of where somehow the Democrats manage to keep control of the House, which is highly unlikely. And the Senate's just it could go either way. I don't see Biden coming out of this the midterms really any stronger.
No, he doesn't come out of. If he can claim that it wasn't the catastrophe they thought it was, he can say, "Hey, it's bottomed out. We're coming back up. We have some plans for the backside of this administration." that will straighten everything out. But I mean, you're going to have to present a pretty strong program because, you know, American people are not inclined to trust them anymore to manage the economy or crime or immigration or energy policy, right? Which is the big four right now. So, you know, you're coming at it being untrustworthy, and the things that would be required to fix all four of those are things that your party is dead set against, right? Immigration, you have to get control of the border. Democrats don't want to do that. Energy, you're going to have to drill domestically and offshore, right? You know, I told you a few months ago, you know, the administration is thinking about ending all offshore drilling. And in the last week or so, they announced that that's exactly what they're doing. Even ones that are permitted now, they want to close off all offshore drilling. Stop it. You think gas is high now, and you're talking about $12 a gallon at that point. Crime, they have, you know, you have all these Soros prosecutors who don't jail anybody. You know, they can't go against that. Soros funds them too, right? You know, the economy, the belt tightening that is required, ending the spending. You know, they're not ready to do that. They want more spending. They have bills up there now for even more spending. So, you know, and then today you get, you know, inflation was, you know, 8.2 is more than they thought it was going to be. Groceries are up more than 11%, right, year over year. They're going to have to raise Social Security benefits, you know, because of the COLA, cost of living adjustment. So which would put the country even further in debt. So, I mean, right now it is a calamity, and, you know, and it's all Democrat policies, right? It's all things that, you know, were going great, and they came in and changed them for ideological reasons and caused these problems.
Yeah. You know, the Social Security thing is kind of interesting because, I mean, it's, you know, that's a huge increase, but I mean, it is tied to the whole CPI, and they look, you know, they announce this, you know, every October what it's going to be. And for years, you know, it's been little to nothing on the increase because inflation's been so low, but inflation reared its ugly head after 40 years. And so they're going to get this big increase. One of the unusual things for the benefits for people like us that are, you know, getting closer and closer to our Social Security collection age, when we can actually start collecting it, is that under Social Security, you know, they have this thing where you know, so for me, it's, you know, I can start collecting at 66 in 10 months. So effectively, basically when I'm 67. But if I wait to the age of 70, you know, you get roughly 8% more payout per year by every year that you wait until 70. But when they have an increase like this, it actually changes that calculus that you may not have to wait to 70. If it keeps going like this, you may actually be able to collect when you're first eligible at your retirement age, because inflation has bumped the benefit up so much that the age 70 benefit really winds up being very minimal in comparison. Plus the fact, as you said, it adds to the depth, you know, but it also makes Social Security shakier in the long run. You know, right. I don't have a lot of confidence in it, but it's there right now, and if I continue to chug along, I'll hopefully collect something of what I paid in. Yeah. But you know, the things are just not going well. I mean, I didn't watch the news to see if there was any announcement from the White House after the inflation figure was. You know, I mean, they could say, you know, we're getting inflation under control because it's going in the right direction. But you know, from 8.3 to 8.2. You know, it's pretty nominal on the top line number. As you said, you know, food inflation is still, you know, raging on. You know,
rent off the map, right?
Yeah. I mean, we just, you know, my wife continues to say, because remember what she used to buy, you know, spend 86 cents on large eggs at Walmart. You know, you can't touch that price right now. You know, there's so many things that you go out, you know, buying meat and all this kind of stuff. It's really a big shock for people. And how do you survive when so much more of your paycheck now is going to those basics, you know, like that. So it definitely harms the economy. And you know, there are going to be voters here during this phase, because we're into mail-in voting in a lot of places. We're getting into early voting in a lot of places. How does it affect those people when they continue to see their paychecks being eroded? Employers can only, you know, raise, you know, wages so much, you know, because somebody's got to pay for that. I mean, I just saw this thing on the news this morning that there's some proposition, I guess, I don't know if it's a district or whatever. It's like, you know, it's to make the minimum wage $15 for waitresses and then they can collect tips on top of that. You're running a restaurant. How do you pay a waitress or waiter $15 an hour and let them collect tips and still make any money? It's hard. They're fighting that thing. My sister-in-law goes through this. My brother-in-law, sister-in-law, but my sister-in-law is more in charge of the restaurant, the little restaurant they own. It's more of a dessert shop, and they haven't raised their prices at all. So their profits, whatever they had, are being pinched. And she's actually afraid to raise her prices because she thinks it attracts a lot of students, and that would chase away the students if she did. But one of her problems is that the students who used to work for $10 plus tips in the restaurant are basically, this little shop are basically saying, we want $20 plus tips. Right. She can't afford to pay that.
Right.
And so
what do you do?
What do you do at this point in time? I mean, you try to recruit your kids who are still college age to come and help out, but there are limitations to that. They don't always have the availability. Some of them actually have jobs while they're both going to school and working a job, regular job. So they're really kind of just being choked, from all of this. And it's just not a good scenario at all. And the administration doesn't have any answers for this. They keep trying to talk about it, but they really don't have a firm answer as to how to handle this. And because employment it's cooling, but it's still up. It's still positive, by a decent number. That means the Federal Reserve can't take its foot off the gas pedal, right? I mean, we will look at another potential 75-point basis increase in interest rates come November. I mean, mortgage rates are already at 6%, pushing 7%. Yeah. People are struggling.
When Trump took office, 2.2 or something like that.
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't know how low it got, but when we were talking with my youngest who bought a house last year, which I will readily admit, I thought, you're crazy. It's going to spend $500,000 on a 43-year-old home that needs, to be fixed up because it looks like a 43-year-old home on the inside. I mean, outdated everything. And they had budgeted on top of that to spend money to go and, upgrade the house and renovate the interior. And but the thing is that in the long run, that looks like a pretty good deal for them because my son said their interest rate is 2.75%.
Yeah. So
there's no way they could afford a house today.
It's it's less than half what it is now.
Yeah. I mean, and Spencer, who they're trying to save as he's trying to, when he figures out when it's going to be a more permanent location. But there's no way he's going to be looking at a house when mortgage rates are in this range. I mean, it's just, the
right.
demand is going to be just choked off.
Yeah, so interest rates are 2.5 times what they were. Inflation is 6 times what it was, right? You're on your third quarter of negative economic growth. I mean, they don't really have a lot of successes to point to here.
Yeah, that was the other thing too. I mean, Biden said, I think the other night on the CNN thing, he's like, he didn't.
He said it was not a recession, but if we do have one, if one does come in the future, it will be small. Right. Well, it's like the media. It's like, what happened there? Nothing. Right. They let him get away with saying this is not a recession, and you're not in your second one now, right? The definition of inflation has always been 2 consecutive quarters of negative economic growth, right? We're now on our third, right? There's no end in sight, and he's still saying, maybe in the future, and the media's like, oh yeah, right. So I mean, that's they're lying through their teeth to help him. So, the day that the second quarter of inflation came out, right? So the Wikipedia page that talks about recessions was edited 181 times to change the definition of inflation. I mean, it's a recession. I mean, it's just like, we'll just change the truth. Yeah. Right? The truth looks bad. We'll have a different truth.
We need to match what's there to what the administration is saying, so it's all the same. And then the liberal media can also join in and say, "See, it's fine. We're all fine.
We're going to avoid this inflation. I mean, this recession."
And once again, we can say if this had been Trump or any other Republican as a president, they would have been all over it. This,
there would have been 181 fewer edits to the Wikipedia page about what constitutes a recession.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's no doubt, so yeah, this negative, the last thing the media wants and the Democrats want, obviously, is talk of a recession when you're in a midterm election, when you're facing election and you've got all this at stake. You don't want the R word to be in people's minds as they vote. Right. So that, to a large degree,
thing that I want to talk about, which is coming as becoming a bigger topic, is price of gas is not falling anymore; it's going back up.
Yeah, you notice how the administration and others are not talking about, how the 90 days of falling gas prices and trying to take credit for that and everything like this. As prices have moved up, nope, they not talk about it.
They don't have anything to say because they don't.
I feel for Californians because, they're so heavily regulated on things, is that they can't escape these outrageous gas prices because of the requirements that, for gasoline production within California, that they're going to remain much higher forever. Yeah. I think, there versus anywhere else. And it's like, this is yet another reason why Californians leave California. High taxes, high gas prices, regulation that just chokes and kills your businesses.
There's a Supreme Court case going to the Supreme Court case before the Supreme Court now, where they challenge these rules that, you can sell it everywhere but California is under Commerce Clause. So it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, that's the thing too. I mean, there's, California, was it California that is come down hard on the gig workers?
Yeah, that's what it is. It's gig. There's a law against gig right? Working. We make everybody W-2.
Look, and I understand in general, this idea. I mean,
Congress wants this. The Democrats have introduced a bill to do this nationwide now.
Right.
And the Biden administration's for it. So
yeah,
another thing to think about when you go to the polls.
Right. They want to roll back what the Trump, Trump administration had kind of eased off a little bit on. I mean, this has been a decades-long battle in terms of what constitutes an independent contractor and whatnot. And there's no doubt that there's been some fudging by businesses to put people off the payroll so they don't have to deal with the benefits and some of the other things. On the other hand, if you're working for Uber, Lyft, DoorDash, Instacart, whatever it may be, this part of the economy has been a boon for a lot of people. People who want it, they went in there with the understanding that they work their own hours. They use the app they're provided by Lyft, Uber, whatever. I mean, Uber drivers also usually drive for Lyft, and they just basically pick up the rides, whichever benefits them the most. And so they control their own hours. They want to work 20 hours of driving, go ahead and do it. The company is just providing the app and things like that. They're not providing the cars and stuff like that. And you control your schedule. So these companies in general don't control your schedule. They give you the option to pick up a job, what's convenient to you. And if you think the job's not paying enough, Uber Eats or whatever, then don't accept the job. Let somebody, it may go begging for all we know. Right. But instead, the Democrats, these liberals, they want to basically say everybody has got to be an employee, which means all these requirements with taxes and the health benefits and all that kind of stuff. Well, who survives under that? I mean, the stock prices of the ones that are public, dropped like 10% the other day when this came out. And then the thing too is that how many of these employees really want that? Because I know that the prices for Uber were really, really cheap when they began and probably ridiculously underpriced. But now I won't touch, I've priced this out to take a ride from my house 5 miles down the road or whatever it is to the Shady Grove Metro and think about catching a Maryland bus, to BWI. But I think the Uber ride is now over $20, $25 or whatever. I remember taking a ride from that Shady Grove Metro to my house years ago, pre-pandemic, and I think I spent like 6 or 7, right? So the effect of some of these things has already come into play. The rides are already more expensive to where a guy like me who had used it infrequently says, I'm not touching that. I mean, it's like you've now priced yourself out. And if they have to add all those benefits and other things, how does the DoorDashes, the Uber Eats, and the just the Ubers and the Lyfts compete? All of a sudden now that their services get to be so expensive, very few people are going to use them, and all the people who relied on that. I mean, those people who are going to get those benefits, they're going to see their income go down, right?
That's right. And these are people you're talking about making people employable, right? These people, as long as you can drive, you're employable, right?
Yeah.
And so you can get into the workforce today,
Yeah, you don't have to really worry about the language aspect, or you don't have to have a college degree or anything like this. If you had a car and you had a good driving record and things like that, plus you get rated, go ahead. They sign you up and go out and drive. There's a shortage of drivers, still. So anyway, all right, we've kind of run up towards the end. So let's talk for a few more minutes. What's on the list here, Brian? Close it out.
Jan 6 committee is going to try again in the next day or so. So I read a thing this morning about ABC put out a thing. What we've learned from the Jan 6 committee, what we basically learned is that, there was a protest and some of the people went into the Capitol, and, some people told Trump that he didn't win the election. Wasn't anybody in any position to know, including the Attorney General, by the way, who, it has now come out that he told Trump he there's no way there was enough corruption for you to have actually won the election. But he had done absolutely nothing to determine whether that statement was true. Right. So, he looks really bad. He also looks bad. It's like, he also may have been involved in this organizing the 51 intelligence people who said that the Hunter Biden's laptop was disinformation. The FBI was given that laptop in 2019. So during the Barr time as Attorney General, like, he had almost 2 years to go through the laptop and say if there was anything criminal about it. They had a full year before you get into the thing where you're messing with campaigns to bring it up or whatever, right? And nothing happened. So when you talk about like who undermined Trump, you got to take a long look at Bill Barr. He did not want this to come out well for Trump. I think it is hilarious that Ben Sasse is being talked about as the president of the University of Florida. I think that is, he can be as useless there as he was in the Senate, which was pretty darn useless.
Before you go on, I just want to say something. And one of the things on here, I had put down, this idea that Trump is a clear and present danger. This whole idea that Democrats so my simple mind says, we're now going into Tom Clancy mode here.
Yeah.
It's like, what? These people are this is just nuts.
And you know what? There's some signs, and you start to see even some people on the left write about this, that they start to realize that this is backfiring. They're like, Americans are like, more than half the country doesn't think the election was straight, right? They may not, they vary in degrees from absolutely certain Trump was robbed to this looks suspicious, right? That's a big continuum of people, right? They're not all on the total Trump wavelength, but there are a lot of people out there, including almost 40% of Democrats, who will admit that it does not look totally straight what happened there. I mean, anytime you tape stuff over the windows so people can't watch the counting, you don't do that so you can run a clean election, right? So, that's one of the things, and it's like his clear and present danger. The other thing is they're going through and they're trying like the Oath Keepers guy and the Proud Boys and all this, and they keep trying to say, Trump knew he lost, right? And he was just doing all this to, overcome, even though he knew he lost, which I don't believe Trump thinks he lost to this day, right? I think Trump is still convinced that he won and got cheated out of it. And B, that he ordered these, he had these thugs on standby to run in and kill everybody, right? And the longer all this goes on, the longer it becomes, these guys might have been here and they might have been armed and they might have been ready to do serious damage, but they didn't talk to Trump. I mean, Trump didn't tell them to do anything. And the reason that they left their guns in the hotel in Virginia and didn't bring them into D.C. is because they had never received any word from Trump that that's what he wanted to happen, right? I mean, they kept saying, if he'll just say the word, we're ready. And he never said the word. So the longer this goes on, the more exculpatory it is for Trump. What else do we have here? Tulsi Gabbard leaves the Democrat Party. 1-800 who cares, right? She's not going to win anything as a Republican, right? You can't. I mean, Republicans can't trust her, right? So I don't think that'll happen of any circumstance. Also, it looks like it was there was a rumor out there that Elon Musk talked to Putin before he tweeted the other day that the two sides should sit down for a peace plan. If that's true, if Putin is saying things to Musk in that conversation, his qualifications to serve in the Senate aren't much better. And there's a lot of that's sort of a place where deadhead politicians go.
I've always thought I'd be qualified to run one, based on what I've seen.
Yeah, you glad hand and raise money. That's all it is, right?
That's right. That's right.
I don't know. I think the whole Jan 6 thing is spinning out, into it's like these storm, where's Hurricane Ian now? It ain't causing anybody any trouble anymore, right? Because it's dead, right? Final thing on that, there were two islands cut off in Southwest Florida, Pine Island and Sanibel. And in less than 3 weeks, DeSantis has managed to get bridges built to both. Right, and they're reopening, they're taking trucks over and restoring everybody's power. This was a remarkable storm recovery, and he won't get credit because he that's right. Show me the money. He won't get credit because it's Democrats and they all hate him, but he did a heck of a job helping Florida recover from the storm.
All right, and I'll throw out the last thing on here too, was just about. I didn't realize this. Okay, I don't pay attention to a lot of what History Month it is. I mean, you get some of promotion like Black History Month and all these different things. But I was sitting at a traffic light last night, and at the intersection right where Quince Orchard High School is in Montgomery County, and on their lighted board is like LGBTQ plus History Month or something like that, and I'm like, whoa, what's going on here? I think, I mean, they're very proud to make sure they push that out, right? They're trying to do this. And I don't know how long that's been going on, but I was like, oh, I don't really remember this being this big a deal before, but it is in our face, and they do want to do it at all levels, right? I mean, this is, right. If it's sponsored by the school system, that means it's K through 12.
Right. And it's, if it's K through 12, it's like, why do you want to talk to my kids about stuff like that? Right. Yeah. So the other thing is, especially when, I don't know if you saw this, but the ACT scores are the lowest they've been in more than 20 years. So it seems that you have a pretty good bit of stuff that you actually need to be taken care of in the classroom rather than, proselytizing for LGBTQ plus month.
Yeah, educate the students like you're supposed to. Quit.
Right. Do your job. Do your triple 3 R's. Right.
That's right. Absolutely. All right. On that note, we're done. All right. Thank you everyone for joining us. Hope you had fun, enjoyed it. I think we had a lot of good conversation as usual. Please, as always, stay safe and stay well. Remember, we live in the greatest country in the world. Do not let anyone tell you otherwise. And as always, God bless America, and we will see you again in 2 weeks. I've got a busy week next week, but we'll have plenty to talk of as we get down to the last 2 weeks before the election. So anyway, we'll see you then, folks. Thanks a lot.